At my retirement party, my daughter-in-law slipped something in my drink, so I switched glasses. The hall was alive with music and laughter, golden lights reflecting off the polished floor. Everyone was smiling, raising glasses, and cheering for Olan, who had spent decades teaching and was finally retiring. He felt proud and happy, soaking in all the love from friends and family. But then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw Kemi, his daughter-in-law, moving strangely near his drink. She leaned closer, whispered to the waiter, and slipped something into his glass. Olan's heart skipped a beat, a cold wave running through him. His hand stayed steady on the glass, his face calm, but inside, confusion and fear swirled. Why would Kemi do this? Tonight was supposed to be a night of joy, of celebration. He scanned the room, seeing the laughter and smiles, everyone unaware of the danger. His mind raced as he tried to understand her motive, yet he stayed still, pretending nothing had happened, hiding his worry behind a polite smile. The music played on, the crowd cheered, and Olan held his glass tightly, knowing that behind the celebration, a storm had quietly settled, and he had to be careful. Olan's mind raced for a moment, but he did not panic. He could feel his heart pounding, yet he forced his hands to stay steady. Watching Kemi closely, he waited for the right moment. When no one was looking, he quietly picked up her glass and swapped it with his own. The movement was so smooth that no one noticed. He placed his new glass down, pretending nothing had happened, while Kemi remained unaware of the switch. The room was full of laughter and chatter, friends and family raising their glasses, everyone ready to toast him. The host called for the toast, and glasses went up in the air. Olan held his calmly, a small, controlled smile on his face, hiding the tension he felt inside. Kemi, following tradition, was the first to sip from her glass. The liquid touched her lips, and almost immediately, her expression faltered. The confident, cheerful smile she had worn all evening stiffened, and a flicker of panic crossed her eyes. She swallowed quickly, trying to hide it, but Olan saw everything. His sharp gaze caught the tiny tremor in her hands, the sudden hesitation, the way her eyes darted around the room as if searching for help. Something wasn't right, and deep down, Olan knew exactly what had happened. Her secret plan, the thing she had tried to hide so carefully, had turned against her without anyone else noticing. The laughter, the music, the celebration continued around them, completely unaware, while Olan silently felt a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. He had outsmarted her without a word, without drawing attention. Kemi's forced composure, the unnatural way she held her glass, the tight line of her lips, all told him that she realized her plan had failed. The tension between them was invisible to everyone else, but it filled the space around them. Olan's heart calmed a little as he sipped from the swapped glass, pretending to enjoy the drink, watching Kemi struggle with the taste she had intended for him. The room celebrated, but for Olan, it was a moment of quiet victory, a small but powerful triumph over the betrayal that had threatened the night. He had turned the situation around without a word, and now the real game had begun, one that no one in the hall yet understood. Every glance, every subtle movement, every forced smile from Kemi was now part of the silent story Olan watched unfold, knowing that the night was far from over and the truth would come out in its own time. Fira, standing close to her father, saw Kemi's sudden change. Her face had gone pale and her hands shook slightly. Fira's eyes widened with worry, and she stepped closer, ready to ask what was wrong. "Are you okay?" she whispered, her voice full of concern. But before she could get any closer, Olan gently placed a hand on her shoulder and gave her a look that said more than words ever could. She stopped instantly, sensing the warning in his eyes. Fira had always trusted her father's judgment, and she knew that whatever was happening, he had it under control. In that moment, Olan's mind drifted back to memories he had tried to hold back, memories of his late wife, Zira. He could see her gentle face in his mind, hear her soft voice, as if she were right there beside him. He remembered her dying words, spoken with a mix of love and urgency. "Protect our children, even from those closest to them." At the time, he had understood them in part, but now, the meaning weighed heavily on him. Tonight, the promise he had made to Zira was being tested in ways he could never have imagined. He looked at Kemi, who was still trying to keep her composure, and then at Fira. who watched with concern and confusion. Olen's chest tightened, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility. Every instinct told him to act carefully, to protect everyone without creating panic or suspicion. He had to keep his children safe, not just from strangers or obvious dangers, but from the hidden threats, the betrayals that could come from those they trusted most. The music and laughter continued around them, but Olen's focus narrowed, every detail becoming sharper. He noticed Kemi's hesitant movements, the way her eyes flicked around the room, the tiny quiver in her hands. He realized that the night of celebration had turned into a test, a silent challenge he could not ignore. Fyra, sensing the tension, but still unsure of what it meant, clutched her father's hand lightly, seeking reassurance. Olen squeezed back gently, silently telling her that everything would be all right. Inside, he made a quiet promise to himself, one that went beyond the words of any vow. He would keep his family safe, no matter the cost. As he watched Kemi and the room around him, Olen felt a surge of determination. The shadows of deceit might be close, but he was ready. He would protect his children, and he would uncover the truth, even if it meant facing the darkness hidden behind the smiles of that night. The weight of Zira's words settled firmly in his heart, guiding his every thought, every movement, every silent decision as the night unfolded. Suddenly, Kemi's hands shook violently, and the glass she was holding slipped from her fingers, shattering on the floor. She stumbled forward, her body giving way, and collapsed right in the middle of the hall. A sharp gasp ran through the room, and the music seemed to stop for a moment. The laughter and cheers turned into shocked murmurs as guests rushed toward her, their faces full of fear and confusion. Some tried to lift her while others called for help, their voices overlapping in panic. Plates were knocked over, and a few people stepped back, unsure what to do. Chaos had filled the hall in seconds. Olen stayed calm, though his heart pounded. He did not move immediately, not because he didn't care, but because he needed to watch, to understand what had just happened. His eyes were locked on Kemi, and he studied every twitch of her face, every faltering breath. Was it food poisoning, something accidental, or something far more deliberate? His mind raced as whispers spread like wildfire through the crowd. Some people speculated aloud, others exchanged worried looks. The room, once full of joy, was now tense and uncertain. Olen noticed the fear in Fyra's eyes as she tried to help, and he gave her a small, calm gesture to stay back, signaling that he had it under control. Even as guests called for a doctor and someone ran to fetch ice, Olen's attention never wavered from Kemi. The woman who had once smiled at him as a daughter now lay before him, weak and vulnerable, and yet he felt a strange clarity in the moment. He could feel the weight of what this collapse meant. It was not just a medical emergency, it was a sign, a clue, a silent message that something darker was at play. The shattered glass glimmered under the lights, the spilled drink staining the floor, but Olen barely noticed. His thoughts were sharp, focused, tracing the events that had led to this moment. Every movement Kemi had made earlier, every nervous glance, every subtle shift of her body now made sense in a way that others could not see. The hall was in chaos, but Olen stayed composed, his mind working faster than the crowd's panic. He knew he had to act carefully, to observe, to protect, and to uncover the truth hidden behind this sudden collapse. As doctors finally arrived and began to attend to Kemi, Olen took a quiet, steadying breath, his eyes never leaving her. The celebration had turned into a test, and he realized that this was only the beginning of a night that would reveal more secrets than anyone could have imagined. As the doctors rushed to Kemi, checking her pulse and helping her sit up, Olen stepped back quietly, careful not to draw attention. The hall was full of noise, people talking, rushing, calling her name, but his mind was focused, sharp. He scanned the floor, the tables, the area around the serving tray. Something didn't feel right. His eyes landed on a small object near the table, almost hidden under a napkin. He bent down and picked it up carefully. It was a tiny, empty vial, and when he brought it closer, a bitter chemical scent hit his nose. His suspicion from earlier flashed clearly in his mind. This was poison. His chest tightened, a mix of fear and anger coursing through him. He clenched the vial in his hand, his thoughts racing. Why would Kemi do this? Why on this night, at a celebration that should have been full of joy? He knew she had a motive, but something didn't add up. Her trembling hands, Her nervous glances, her hesitation, they all told him she wasn't acting entirely on her own. Someone had pushed her, forced her into this act. He thought of the people around her, the family, the friends, anyone who might have a reason to harm him. His eyes narrowed as he pieced together the possible scenarios. The real enemy wasn't just the woman lying on the floor. It was someone hiding in the shadows. Someone who had planned this carefully. Someone who had pulled the strings without anyone noticing. Olan's mind worked quickly, connecting each subtle clue. The way Kemi had acted, the timing of her collapse, the hidden vial, the bitter smell. He realized that tonight's chaos was not random. It was planned, and the person behind it wanted him out of the way. His heart pounded, but his face stayed calm. He couldn't panic. He had to think clearly. Every second counted. He looked around the hall, seeing the worry and confusion on everyone's faces. Yet he remained silent, observing, analyzing, waiting for more signs. The shadows held answers, and Olan knew he had to uncover them before anyone else acted. His mind replayed every moment from the evening, every smile, every whispered word, every small gesture. Slowly, the pieces began to fit together. The betrayal ran deeper than he had first imagined. Someone he trusted, someone close, had planned this and used Kemi as a tool. He clenched the vial tightly, his resolve hardening. He had to protect his family, find the real enemy, and make sure the truth came out. In that quiet, tense moment, with the crowd distracted and Kemi in the doctor's care, Olan's determination grew. He would not let this night end in lies and danger. The shadows had secrets, but he was ready to expose them. Later that night, the hospital room was quiet except for the soft beeping of machines and Kemi's shallow breaths. She slowly opened her eyes, blinking against the harsh white light. Olan was already there, standing silently by her bedside. His face was calm, but his eyes held a weight she had never seen before. Kemi's hands trembled, and she tried to speak, but her voice faltered. Olan leaned slightly closer, keeping his tone gentle yet firm. "Why, Kemi?" he asked softly, each word heavy with pain and disbelief. She swallowed hard, tears welling up in her eyes, and for the first time the walls she had built around herself began to crumble. Her body shook as she whispered, I didn't want to. I was forced." Her tears fell freely now, streaking her cheeks. "They threatened my child," she choked out. "They said if I didn't do it, something would happen to him." Her words hung in the air, suffocating and raw. Olan felt a shiver run down his spine. His chest tightened, a mixture of anger, fear, and shock flooding. He gripped the edge of the bedside table, steadying himself, and waited for her to continue. Kemi's voice barely rose above a whisper as she uttered the name, and the sound hit Olan like a knife. It was someone he had trusted completely, someone he had welcomed into his family and respected. His mind froze for a moment, images flashing of that person smiling, laughing, and appearing harmless. The realization burned him from the inside. He could feel the betrayal, sharp and deep, spreading like fire through his veins. Kemi's confession continued, tears flowing freely, and she explained how she had no choice, how fear for her child had pushed her into this desperate act. Every detail she gave, every trembling word, added to the weight on Olan's shoulders. He looked at her, not with anger, not yet, but with a quiet intensity that made her shiver. The room felt smaller, the world outside fading away. It was just the two of them, the truth laid bare, raw and unprotected. Olan's mind raced, connecting the dots, thinking of what needed to be done, how to protect his family, and how to confront the real threat. He stayed silent for a moment, letting her confession sink in, feeling the betrayal and the danger looming behind the words. He knew that tonight, nothing would ever be the same. The gentle, familiar trust he had held was shattered, and in its place, a cold determination began to grow. The child, the family, the lies, the threats, all of it pressed down on him, and he realized that the next steps he would take had to be precise, careful, and final. The truth hit Olan like a thunderbolt, sharper and colder than he could have imagined. It was not some stranger hiding in the shadows, or a distant enemy plotting against him. It was his own eldest son, Ad, the boy he had raised, taught right from wrong, and trusted with his heart and his home. Every memory of Ade smiling as a child, every birthday celebrated together, every lesson taught in patience and honor, now felt like a cruel trick. Ade had planned everything, the timing, the manipulation, even using Kemi, his own wife, as a tool in this dark scheme. The realization made Olan's chest tighten, a pain deeper than any physical wound. Aid's greed had consumed him completely. He wanted his father gone, not out of anger or disagreement, but purely for money, for property, for control. He had looked at the family he was part of, the father who had given him everything, and decided that none of that mattered if he could take it all. Olan felt a cold fire of betrayal spreading through him. The son he had loved, trained and guided, had turned against him, plotting in secret while wearing a mask of obedience and respect. He thought about Kemi, trembling under the hospital lights, and how Aid had manipulated her fears, twisting her love for their child into a weapon. She had no choice, yet she carried the guilt alone, while Aid hid behind her actions, smiling, pretending innocence. Olan's mind replayed every interaction with Aid over the past weeks, trying to see if there had been signs, warning signals he had missed. Every small lie, every subtle avoidance, every cold glance now had meaning. Betrayal from a stranger could have been confronted, but betrayal from one's own bloodline cut deeper, harder, and left scars that never fully healed. Olan's thoughts went to the pension, the house, the life he had built, not because the money mattered, but because it was part of his family, his legacy, something Aid wanted to destroy to claim as his own. The weight of it pressed down, but Olan forced himself to remain steady, to think clearly. Rage was present, but it was silent, controlled, because he knew that acting in anger would play into Aid's hands. The real fight had just begun, and he had to plan carefully, protect Kemi, protect the family, and expose Aid for what he truly was. As he stood there, the hospital lights casting a harsh glow over Kemi and the room, Olan realized that this betrayal would change everything. The son he had trusted, loved and raised to be honorable, had chosen greed over blood, and the consequences of that choice would be his undoing. Olan's mind sharpened, a plan forming quietly but clearly. Aid might have tried to hide in plain sight, but the truth had been revealed, and no amount of charm or lies could erase the reality. The enemy was in his own bloodline, and it was time to confront him. Olan felt a storm of anger and hurt inside, but he did not let it show. He knew that yelling or confronting Aid in the moment would give him an excuse to deny everything, to twist the story, or to hide behind lies. Instead, Olan decided on a quiet, careful plan. He would not act out of rage. He would act with precision. He called the family together the next evening, under the pretense of celebrating the success of his retirement, making sure everything looked normal. The house was decorated, the lights were warm, and everyone assumed it was just another joyful gathering. Aid walked in, confident, thinking he had already won, that the collapse and fear of the night before had scared Olan into submission. He smiled, pretending innocence, never suspecting that the real reckoning had already begun. Olan greeted everyone, speaking in calm, measured tones, masking the tension coiling in his chest. Slowly, he guided the conversation toward the events of the previous night, sharing small, subtle observations, asking pointed questions that seemed casual but were designed to make Aid uneasy. Then, with a quiet hand, Olan presented Kemi's recorded confession. The room fell silent as everyone listened, hearing the trembling voice of the woman who had been forced into betrayal. The details of threats and manipulations laid bare for all to hear. Aid's confident expression faltered. He tried to speak, to justify himself, but every word came out shaky, weak, unconvincing. The evidence was clear, the truth undeniable. Olan then revealed the vial, the proof of the poison, and explained the careful observations he had made. Every move, every lie, every attempt at manipulation was exposed before family and neighbors alike. The hall felt heavier, the warmth replaced by tension and disbelief. Aid's siblings stared at him with wide eyes, hurt and anger mixing on their faces. Neighbors, once friendly and smiling, now recoiled in shock at the betrayal from within the family. Aid's mask of charm and innocence shattered completely, leaving him exposed and small in the eyes of everyone. He shifted, stammered, tried to explain, but it was too late. Olan watched quietly, his face calm, letting the truth speak louder than any words he could have shouted. The judgment did not need his voice. It came from the shock, the evidence, and the silent realization of those around him. Olan's plan had worked perfectly, not through anger, not through force, but through careful observation, patience, and the quiet strength of a father who refused to be defeated. Ade was left broken, his pride destroyed, while Olan stood tall, dignified, and in control, proving that sometimes the most powerful revenge is the one done silently, letting the truth and consequences unfold naturally. The room, once filled with laughter and celebration, now bore witness to justice served quietly but completely, and Olan's strength shone brighter than any display of anger ever could. When the authorities finally arrived, the tension in the room was thick, almost suffocating. Ade tried to speak first, trying to twist the story, to paint himself as innocent, to make it seem like everything had been a misunderstanding. His voice was loud at first, full of false confidence, but it faltered as Olan calmly presented the evidence. Every lie Ade told fell apart under the weight of the recordings, the vial, and the careful observations Olan had collected. Each detail, each confession, each proof Olan laid out, left Ade smaller and smaller until his confidence evaporated entirely. He looked around at his siblings, hoping for support, for a glimmer of understanding, but found only faces turned away. Their eyes held disappointment, anger, and betrayal, and the warmth of family he had relied on was gone. He realized too late that he had lost their trust forever. Even the neighbors, once welcoming and friendly, now whispered in shock and disbelief. Some shook their heads, some avoided looking at him, and the sense of shame pressed down on Ade more heavily than any punishment could. The money, the pension, the property he had plotted to take, suddenly all of it seemed meaningless. Without the respect of the people around him, without the family he had tried to manipulate, wealth had no value. He had wanted to rule the household, to take control of the life his father had built. But in one night, every plan he had made crumbled to dust. Ade's pride turned to despair as the authorities explained the charges, and he realized that his actions had consequences far beyond what he imagined. He was not only facing legal punishment, he was facing the emptiness of losing everything he thought mattered. His parents' trust, his siblings' love, his standing in the community, all gone. His hand shook slightly as he looked around, seeing the silent judgment of those who had once looked up to him. The shame was unbearable, pressing on him more than walls, chains, or a courtroom ever could. He had lost the very people he wanted to control, the family he wanted to bend to his will. And in that moment, with every eye on him, Ade understood fully the cost of greed and betrayal. He had tried to take everything from his father, to claim the life and wealth that were not his, and instead he had lost it all. No money, no influence, no respect could repair the damage. He was left with nothing but regret, guilt, and the heavy weight of shame, a prisoner not of bars, but of the choices he had made and the family he had destroyed. Ade had wanted power, but in chasing it, he had given up the only things that truly mattered: love, trust, and belonging. The consequences were final, and he felt it deep in his bones. He had lost everything he had ever thought he deserved. By the end of the night, the hall was quiet, the chaos of earlier replaced by a heavy, tense stillness. Olan stood tall, his posture calm and composed, radiating a strength that no betrayal could break. He looked at Kemi, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling as she whispered apologies. She had caused so much fear and pain, yet in that moment, Olan felt no anger toward her. Instead, he saw the fear and regret in her eyes, the love for her child that had driven her into desperate actions. He took a slow breath, and with gentle words, he offered her a chance at redemption, a way to rebuild trust and protect the family she had endangered. Relief and hope flickered across Kemi's face, and for a brief moment, the bond of family seemed to stretch, fragile but still alive. Then his gaze shifted to Ade, the son who had betrayed him in the deepest way possible. Ade's eyes sought any sign of forgiveness, any hint that he could escape the weight of his actions. But Olan's eyes held only calm resolve. He did not shout, he did not argue, and he did not look away. He gave Ada nothing but silence, a silence heavier than any words could be, a punishment that cut deeper than anger or scolding. In that quiet, Ade could feel the full weight of his loss. The family's trust, his reputation, and the respect he had squandered were gone forever. Olan's silent strength made the consequences clear, without a single accusation. Sometimes, letting the truth speak is more powerful than any confrontation. Olan turned slowly, walking toward the exit. The night air was cool against his skin, carrying the distant sounds of the city and the faint hum of celebration left behind. With each step, he felt lighter, freer, stronger. He had faced betrayal, danger, and deception, and yet he had not let it define him. Instead, he had shown patience, wisdom, and courage, qualities that would leave a mark far deeper than fear or revenge ever could. As he walked into the night, people watched in awe, understanding in their hearts that this was no ordinary man. His retirement was not an ending. It was the beginning of a legacy, one built on integrity, resilience, and quiet strength. The night sky stretched endlessly above, and Olan felt a sense of peace mixed with determination. He had protected his family, exposed the lies, and ensured that justice, both silent and powerful, had been served. Betrayal had tested him, but he had walked through it stronger, calmer, and wiser. Everyone who saw him that night would remember not the chaos or the betrayal, but the quiet power of a father who refused to be broken, who chose dignity over anger, and who understood that the greatest victories are often those won without a word. In that moment, Olan's legacy was clear. No deceit, no greed, no betrayal could ever take away the strength of a man who walked forward with purpose, love, and unwavering resolve.